My young boss fired me before my contract ended and said I'd be replaced. He cut off all my benefits and gave me just $30 as a pension. Before leaving, I deleted the company's entire software system. The next morning, chaos took over. The employees stopped him at the door and handed him their resignation letters. Panicked and desperate, he called me for help. I laugh because my name is Sarah Williams. I'm 45 now, but I've spent the last 25 years of my life devoted to one company, a place I thought would be my second home forever. I joined right after graduating from college, full of hope and ambition. At that time, the company was still small, more of a startup really, and it was led by Michael Benson, a man whose wisdom and kindness left a mark on everyone he met. I was a shy, awkward young woman back then, far more comfortable around computers than people. Technology was my escape. I spent hours tinkering with code, building software systems, and finding solutions to problems most people didn't even know existed. It was Michael who recognized my potential when I applied for the position of a junior programmer. He told me, "Sarah, I see something special in you. I think you'll do great things here." From the very beginning, Michael treated me with respect and encouragement. He wasn't just a boss, he was a mentor. Under his guidance, I thrived. I worked tirelessly, building the company's core software systems from scratch. The systems I created weren't just functional, they became the backbone of the company's operations. Every department from sales to logistics depended on them, and Michael never failed to acknowledge my contributions. That meant the world to me. One thing I'll never forget is the unique contract Michael offered me when I started. It included a clause that allowed me to retain ownership of the software I developed. He explained it as a way to safeguard my work and ensure fairness. At the time, I thought it was just a formality, but as the years passed, that clause became more significant than I ever imagined. The company grew rapidly over the years, expanding to new markets and hiring more employees. With every success, I felt a sense of pride. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of something meaningful. Michael's leadership style made everyone feel valued. He believed in building a company that cared for its people, and he practiced what he preached. Bonuses, promotions, and recognition were given based on merit, and there was a sense of unity among the staff. However, life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way. A few years ago, Michael's health began to decline. It started with small things, missed meetings, unexplained fatigue. But soon it became clear that his condition was serious. He was diagnosed with a chronic illness, one that required long-term treatment and frequent hospital visits. The news shook the entire company. While Michael tried to stay involved, he eventually had to step down from his role as president. His son, Andrew Benson, took over. I had met Andrew a few times before. He was charming, confident, and full of bold ideas. At first, I believed he could carry on his father's legacy. He even gave a rousing speech during his inauguration, promising to honor his father's vision while bringing in fresh energy. I wanted to trust him. After all, he was Michael's son. But Andrew's leadership was nothing like his father's. He was focused on efficiency and profitability above all else, and he wasn't shy about making drastic changes to achieve his goals. The first few months of his presidency were filled with optimism, but it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Andrew began implementing cost-cutting measures that disrupted the company's harmony. Long-standing employees were reassigned to roles they weren't suited for, and younger, less experienced workers were promoted to key positions. His reasoning was simple. He wanted a modern, fast-paced company led by fresh minds. The changes didn't sit well with me, but I told myself it wasn't my place to judge. I continued doing my job, ensuring the systems ran smoothly despite the chaos around me. It wasn't easy. Talented colleagues, many of whom I had worked with for decades, started resigning one by one. They felt undervalued, cast aside in favor of Andrew's vision. Each departure felt like losing a piece of the company's soul. Still, I stayed. I told myself I had a responsibility to the company, to the systems I had built, and to the remaining employees who depended on them. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that the company I once loved was slipping away. The camaraderie, the mutual respect, and the sense of belonging, all of it was fading. I remember one conversation with David Carter, a bright and ambitious IT specialist I had been mentoring. "Sarah," he said one day, "what's happening to this place? It doesn't feel the same anymore." I nodded, understanding his frustration. "I know, David. But we can't lose hope. This company has been through tough times before. We just have to keep doing our best." David sighed. "It's hard to stay optimistic when good people are being pushed out. I don't want to end up like them." His words stayed with me. I couldn't promise him things would get better because I wasn't sure myself. But I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to give up. I had dedicated 25 years to this company, and I wasn't about to let Andrew Benson ruin everything Michael had built. Looking back, I wonder if I should have seen the signs earlier. Andrew's focus on short-term gains was a stark contrast to his father's long-term vision. The tension in the office was palpable, and morale was at an all-time low. It was only a matter of time before things came to a head. And they did, but not in the way I expected. Things began to spiral out of control after Andrew's first year as president. His focus on cost-cutting had turned ruthless. Departments were slashed to skeleton crews, and anyone who wasn't seen as essential was reassigned or let go. But it wasn't just the layoffs that hurt, it was the way Andrew treated people. He saw long-serving employees like me as relics of the past, obstacles to the modern company he envisioned. At first, I tried to stay out of his way. I kept my head down and focused on my work, making sure the systems I had spent years developing continued to run smoothly. But Andrew's changes began to affect even my department. He started questioning the necessity of the systems I had built, arguing that newer, cheaper software might be more efficient. I tried to explain the risks of replacing a well-integrated system, but he wouldn't listen. One day, Andrew called me into his office for a meeting. I could tell right away it wasn't going to be good news. He sat behind his massive desk, a smug smile on his face, and gestured for me to sit. "Sarah," he began, "I've been looking over the budget and I noticed your department is one of the most expensive in the company. Do you think that's sustainable?" I frowned, unsure how to respond. "The systems I manage are critical to the company's operations," I said carefully. "They handle everything from inventory tracking to customer orders. If those systems fail..." Andrew waved a hand dismissively. "I understand that, but don't you think we could achieve the same results with a less expensive solution? Maybe something off the shelf?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Off-the-shelf systems wouldn't be tailored to our needs. They could cause significant downtime during the transition, and we'd lose the custom features that have helped us stay competitive. Andrew leaned back in his chair, his smile fading. "Look, Sarah, I appreciate your loyalty, but times are changing. We need to adapt." I left that meeting feeling uneasy. For the first time, I realized that my position and everything I had built for the company was at risk. It wasn't just about the systems. It was about the culture of respect and teamwork that Michael had fostered. Andrew was tearing it all apart. The breaking point came a few weeks later. Andrew called me into his office again, this time with an envelope in hand. He handed it to me with a practiced air of formality. "Sarah," he said, after careful consideration, "we've decided to let you go. Your last day will be at the end of this month." For a moment, I just stared at him, unable to process his words. "You're letting me go?" I finally managed to say. "After 25 years?" Andrew shrugged. "It's not personal. It's just business. Your pension is outlined in the contract you signed when you joined the company." I opened the envelope and found a check inside, along with a note stating my pension amount. My heart sank as I read the figure. $30. I looked up at Andrew, stunned. "This can't be right," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't what I agreed to." Andrew smirked, clearly enjoying my reaction. "It's all in the contract. Take another look." He slid a copy of my original employment contract across the desk, pointing to a handwritten note next to the section about the pension. It read, "Pension, $30, in writing that wasn't part of the original text. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal. This wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate. I stood up, clutching the envelope. "You can't do this," I said, my voice rising. "This company wouldn't exist without the systems I built. Without me." Andrew leaned forward, his smirk widening. "I think you're overestimating your importance, Sarah. The company will be fine without you." I left his office in a daze, my mind racing. How could he do this? How could he reduce my years of dedication to a mere $30? But as the shock wore off, I felt something else: determination. If Andrew thought he could erase my contributions so easily, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. I went straight to the IT department, where David was waiting. He could tell something was wrong as soon as he saw my face. "What happened?" he asked, concern in his voice. I handed him the envelope and explained everything. When I finished, he was furious. "This is unbelievable," he said. "After everything you've done for this company." I nodded. "I know. But there's something he's forgotten." David frowned. "What do you mean?" I pulled out a copy of my employment contract, pointing to the clause that Michael had included all those years ago. "The systems I built don't belong to the company. They belong to me. And if I leave, the systems go with me." David's eyes widened as he realized what I was saying. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" I nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything. If Andrew wants to play dirty, I'm not going down without a fight." Over the next few days, David and I worked quietly, dismantling the systems piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Those systems were like my children, and taking them apart felt like tearing out a piece of myself. But I knew it was the only way to make Andrew understand the value of what he had so carelessly discarded. On my last day, I handed him my keys and walked out of the office for the final time. By the end of the afternoon, the systems were offline and chaos erupted. Phones were ringing off the hook, emails weren't being sent, and entire departments were paralyzed. I could hear the panic in their voices as I walked away. "Sarah," David said as we left the building together, "do you think he'll realize what he's done?" I looked back at the office, where Andrew's arrogance had led him to this moment.
"He'll realize," I said.
"And when he does, he'll have no choice but to face the consequences." The morning after my departure, I woke up to a flood of missed calls and messages. Most of them were from Andrew Benson himself, his tone shifting from demanding to desperate. I ignored them all, sipping my coffee as I scrolled through the news. It didn't take long for the story to make headlines. Local company faces system failure. Operations halted. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. I wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed watching others suffer, even someone like Andrew. But I reminded myself of what he had done, reducing my decades of loyalty to a meaningless sum, mocking my contributions, and discarding me without a second thought. If he wanted to learn the value of what I had built, this was the only way. David texted me a few hours later. "They're in complete chaos. Phones aren't working, emails aren't going through, and they've lost access to customer records." I couldn't help but smile. Andrew had underestimated me, but now he was facing the full consequences of his arrogance. Later that day, Andrew finally got through to me. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity won out. "Sarah," he said, his voice tense. "What have you done?" "I followed the contract," I replied calmly. "You wanted me gone and the systems went with me. It's all perfectly legal." "You can't do this," he snapped. "The entire company is paralyzed. Do you have any idea what this is costing us?" "I do," I said, my tone icy. "And maybe now you'll understand the cost of undervaluing your employees." There was a long silence on the other end. When Andrew spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Look, Sarah, I made a mistake. Let's work something out. Name your price, and we'll pay you to bring the systems back online." For a moment, I considered his offer. It would be easy to take the money and walk away, but I knew that wouldn't solve the deeper issue. Andrew would go right back to his destructive ways, and the company would continue to crumble. No, I needed to take this further. "My price," I said. $1 million. "What?" Andrew exploded. "That's outrageous. There's no way we can pay you that much." "Then good luck rebuilding the systems from scratch," I said. "You'll spend far more than $1 million in time and resources." "You're insane," he shouted before hanging up. I set my phone down, feeling a mix of satisfaction and nervous energy. I knew Andrew wouldn't give in easily, but I also knew he had no choice. The company's survival depended on the systems I had built, and without them, his leadership would be exposed as the disaster it truly was. Over the next few days, the chaos only grew worse. Departments were scrambling to find workarounds, employees were overwhelmed, and customers were furious. Andrew's supporters, who had once praised his visionary leadership, were now questioning his competence. David kept me updated on the situation. "They're running out of options," he said during one of our calls. Even Andrew's most loyal allies are starting to turn against him.
Good, I said.
It's about time someone held him accountable. But the real turning point came when Michael Benson returned to the office. I hadn't spoken to him since my dismissal, but I knew he wouldn't stay on the sidelines once he realized what was happening. Despite his poor health, Michael's presence was commanding. He called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis, and from what David told me, it was a sight to behold. "Andrew," Michael said during the meeting, his voice steady despite his illness. "You've made a mess of everything I built. You've disrespected loyal employees, driven away talent, and now you've crippled the company by ignoring Sarah's warnings. This stops now." Andrew tried to defend himself, blaming the system failure on me. But Michael wasn't having it. "Don't you dare shift the blame," he said. "Sarah gave this company 25 years of her life. She built the systems that kept us running, and you treated her like she was disposable. This is your fault, Andrew, and you need to take responsibility." By the end of the meeting, the board had made their decision. Andrew was to be demoted to an entry-level position. It was a humiliating blow for him, but it was the only way to salvage what was left of the company. Later that evening, I got a call from Michael. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "I owe you an apology. I should have stepped in sooner." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. "I'm just glad you're back." "I need your help," he continued. "The board wants you to return as Chief Operating Officer. You're the only person who can restore what Andrew destroyed." For a moment, I was speechless. Coup? It was an incredible opportunity, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to step into such a high-profile role. "Think about it," Michael said. "The company needs you, Sarah. And I can't think of anyone better for the job." I promised him I would consider it, but deep down, I already knew my answer. This was my chance to rebuild the company I had loved, to create a workplace where people like me would be valued. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. After Michael's call, I spent the night reflecting. Becoming the Chief Operating Officer would be a tremendous responsibility, but it also felt like the natural culmination of everything I had worked for. This wasn't just about systems or titles. It was about preserving the legacy of a company that once stood for fairness, innovation, and integrity. The next morning, I called Michael. "I'm in," I told him. "But on one condition. Andrew can't interfere." "You have my word," Michael said. "He'll be starting over as an entry-level employee, and he'll report to you. He needs to understand what it means to truly build something." With that assurance, I stepped back into the company I had left behind. Walking through the office, I was met with mixed reactions. Some people looked relieved, others surprised, and a few avoided eye contact altogether. But what struck me most was the quiet sense of hope beginning to stir. My return wasn't just about fixing the systems. It was about rebuilding trust. The first order of business was restoring the software systems. David and I dove back into the work we knew best, reconstructing the systems piece by piece. It was a massive undertaking, but with the experience we had, it didn't take long to get the company back on its feet. By the end of the week, operations were running smoothly again, and the sense of relief was palpable. "David," I said as we wrapped up the final stages of the restoration, "I couldn't have done this without you." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "I'm just glad to be part of the solution." "You're more than that," I said. "You've shown incredible loyalty and resourcefulness through all of this. I want to make sure that doesn't go unnoticed." As the systems came back online, so did morale. Employees who had been on the verge of burnout began to find their rhythm again. I made it a point to walk the floors, listening to concerns, and reconnecting with old colleagues. Many of them shared their frustrations with Andrew's leadership and their hopes for a better future under Michael's guidance, and, to my surprise, mine. One afternoon, Michael called me into his office. Sarah, he said, the board is impressed with how quickly you've turned things around. They want to formalize your role as COO at the next shareholder meeting. The weight of his words hit me. Chief Operating Officer. It felt surreal, but I also knew I was ready. Michael leaned back in his chair, a warm smile on his face. You've earned this, Sarah. And I couldn't be prouder. As for Andrew, his demotion was as humbling as it was necessary. Watching him adjust to life as an entry-level employee was an experience I never expected to witness. He struggled at first, frustrated by the lack of authority and the mundane tasks he was assigned. But over time, I began to notice subtle changes. He was listening more, asking questions, and even seeking advice from his peers. Whether it was genuine growth or simply survival, I couldn't say. But I hoped that, in some small way, he was learning what it meant to truly contribute. Months passed and the company began to stabilize. We hired back some of the talented employees who had left during Andrew's tenure, offering them roles that matched their skills and experience. I worked closely with Michael and the board to implement policies that prioritized fairness and growth, ensuring that no one else would face the kind of dismissal I had endured. David, meanwhile, continued to shine. His dedication and expertise earned him a promotion to IT director, a role I knew he was more than capable of handling. You deserve this, I told him during his first day in the new position. And I can't wait to see what you'll achieve. He grinned. I've had a great mentor. One day, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Andrew. He looked different, more grounded, less self-assured. He hesitated before speaking. Sarah, he said, I just wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
For everything. I studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. There was no trace of the arrogance that had defined him before. Thank you, I said simply. I hope you've learned something from all this. I have, he said, his voice quiet. More than I ever thought I needed to. The shareholder meeting where my role as COO was finalized felt like the start of a new chapter, not just for me, but for the entire company. As I stood before the board, presenting our vision for the future, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about titles or power. It was about rebuilding a culture of respect, innovation, and resilience. When the meeting ended, Michael pulled me aside. You've done something remarkable, Sarah, he said. This company wouldn't have survived without you. It wasn't just me, I replied. It was everyone who believed in what this place could be, including you. Looking back now, I realize how far I've come, not just as an employee but as a person. The journey wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wanted to give up. But in the end, standing up for what I believed in was worth it. The company is stronger now, not just because of the systems or policies, but because of the people who make it what it is. As I walk through the office each day, I see a team that's united, a workplace that's thriving, and a future that feels bright. And I know, without a doubt, that this is exactly where I'm meant to be.